Good evening, colleagues, officers, and those watching at home. Welcome to today's meeting of the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee, Monday, the 9th of December. So we'll begin with some housekeeping announcements. If any members of the public who are attending need to use the toilets, they're just behind me here. And when leaving, please use the door on my left rather than the door at the back. We've received some apologies for today's meeting. So we have apologies from Councillor Melly, who's substituted by Councillor Taylor, from Councillor Rowley, who's substituted by Councillor Stewart, and from Councillor Waller, who is substituted by Councillor Vassey. So welcome all. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Can ask any members to declare any interest if they wish. Nope. Okay. Thank you. Agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November. Can I ask if anyone has any matters of accuracy in those minutes? No, happy to approve those. Super. Thank you very much. Before we move on to public participation, just a quick update on agenda item 7, the York Climate Commission update. We had anticipated that Councillor Kent, as a relevant executive member, would be joining us to take part in the discussion and ask and answer members' questions. Unfortunately, Councillor Kent isn't well, so isn't able to be here. So what I propose is to handle this agenda item slightly differently. And at that agenda item, ask members to make any observations they wish to make on the report, with the view to a more comprehensive report coming back in the new year. I'm conscious that a new chair of the commission is, I think, in the process of being appointed. So I think it would make sense to have that discussion with Councillor Kent in the room. So the proposal would be that we get views from members on issues that they may want to see included in a more comprehensive report, and then we schedule that to come back in the new year. But just to flag that up for members and for the public speaker who's taken the trouble to come and join us today. So we'll keep that agenda item, but we'll handle that slightly differently, given that Councillor Kent isn't able to be here. Which brings us on to public participation. So we have one person registered to speak today. That's Debbie Cobbett. Would you like to join us at the table, Debbie? So Debbie has registered to speak to us on agenda item 7, the York Climate Commission update. So Debbie, you'll have 3 minutes to tell us anything you want to tell us about the report. I'll give you an indication when you've got 30 seconds remaining. But on the microphone in front of you, there's a button with the word mic underneath. If you want to press that, that's fine. Yes, you'll soon get back into the swing of it. So when you're ready, if you can press that button, and then over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was great to open out membership of York Climate Commission, which used to be a very secretive bunch of bosses. And I'm pleased to be part of 3 enthusiastic working groups: education, health and economy, all of which held events during York Environment Weeks. I think there were some others, but I was at those, and they were well attended and helped to spread the word. I especially hope going forward that the economy group will reach out further, consider more deeply what a green economy might look like, by examining examples of community wealth building, donut economics, community-led sustainable tourism here in York. Your update omits two of the groups set up in January, which are vital to any action on climate and nature, namely food and biodiversity. Now, the latter may have been subsumed under the rather oddly named Connecting with Green Spaces, but food is a dreadful omission, given how the current broken food system impacts on climate and nature, as well as human health and food insecurity. This sector's the second largest source of carbon emissions, has huge impacts on the health of people and planet. There is good work for York to build on, and I hope we can look again at the Citizen Food Assembly, Good Food York, Edible York and others, and connections can be made with schools, Bob Webb's free school meals and community gardening and all sorts of projects. So I think this is an urgent area to work on. Another huge omission, I think, is any connection with the new mayor. The website needs input, not just in terms of content and reports from working groups, though those would be helpful, but also in terms of its layout so that it's possible to find stuff and a coherent story without broken links or information about the now defunct PCAN, Place-Based Climate Action Network, I think that was. So please save us from that online mess. People in York need to hear stories about the Climate Commission in the media, online, so more people are drawn in and there's clarity about what we're trying to do. There's so much rubbish about finger-wagging environmentalists and the costs of going green, when cutting carbon fast will cost less. If we do it like that, instead of cliff edge like that, then we save all those emissions there. So it's really important. And there is an online petition for a national education campaign about this, and everybody needs to understand. Finally, I'd like to see York City Council support this project for a fossil-free non-proliferation treaty. I've given some of you flyers.
So, thank you, Debbie.
Glasgow's just signed up. Edinburgh signed up, London, Birmingham. And so please accept the flyers, and I hope this will get onto the full council agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Thank you for coming to talk to us. We don't often get public speakers, so it's really good to have your input. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 5, which is the York Central update. So if officers and partners would like to join us at the table, please. So we're also joined by Councillor Katie Lomas, who is the responsible executive member. So I'll ask our guests to introduce themselves shortly, but just by way of background, this committee, part of our remit is to receive updates on major projects, and at a forthcoming meeting we have a similar update on the Castle Gateway projects. This is our 6-monthly update on York Central. So our role as a committee is not to go into the minute detail on the delivery aspects of the scheme, but to I suppose provide a degree of sort of challenge and assurance in terms of project delivery, and for the opportunity for the partners involved to update us on work they're doing and to answer any questions that members may have on obviously a very important scheme that we're all have become more familiar with over the years. So if I can introduce Claire as a responsible director and our partners to briefly introduce yourselves, that'd be great, and then please introduce the report, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I just introduce myself and then hand over to each of the partners to introduce themselves, and then I've got a very short introduction. We do have a presentation, but if it's difficult to put it up today, we can share it on a different day. It has been emailed to the webcast team if they are able to share it. So I'm Claire Fole. I'm the interim director of city developments. I start with
Tom Gilman, Managing Director of McLaren, and one of the JV partners on York Central, acting as development partner with Homes England.
Good evening, Leon Guides. I'm the project director acting on behalf of the landowners Homes England and Network Rail on York Central.
Good evening, I'm Tom Devine. I'm the surveyor for the National Railway Museum.
So just by way of a short introduction, we're bringing this update to you following scrutiny on the 18th of March. Today, Homes England Development Partners, who are one half of our partners, McLaren with Arlington, also one of our development partners, and Tom, our representative from the National Railway Museum, are here to answer your questions. Just by way of summary, since scrutiny in March, when we last met to talk to you about York Central, planning has been approved for a 6-storey government hub. Lead members and ward members have met throughout the course of the last few months. Today, the National Railway Museum access has been revised for arrangements through Central Hall, with ward members updated around about 3:30 this afternoon. The project is now very much a reality. The master plan is in Annex A, and that was approved in 2019 with outline planning permission for 2,500 homes, of which 20% must be affordable. And Tom will be able to update you around progress with that, with the developers planning to go much further. We've also had planning permission, outline planning approval for up to 88,000 metres square of office space and a 400-bed hotel. Annex B, which is a series of photos, will show the infrastructure very much underway. And you can see from the drone footage, much of the site is already starting to look like the master plan, with key routes going through it and key works underway. Like I said, we do have a presentation, but apologies, it was quite short notice. Are you able to share it? Should we take questions?
Don't worry about it, Claire. Carry on.
So that's the introduction I wanted to give to you. Very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the benefit of those watching at home, in the papers for today's meeting, there were some images of some aerial views of the site as it's coming to fruition. So as we don't have visuals here, if anyone watching wants to see the things that Claire was speaking about. Councillor Rose?
Yeah, if we're able to get the presentation even a few minutes in, I feel like it would be very valuable to us as a committee. If it's obviously if it's impossible, that's different. Yeah, but
I'm in the hands of technicians. I don't control the
if it can be done.
If the images can be brought up on screen, then if members have particular questions on any particular views, then we can have a look at them. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got just 2 or 3, hopefully quite brief questions, points of clarity, really, just in the report. So page 10, paragraph 11 talks about a group that's been set up within the council to resolve issues within the council's remit. And I've sort of read that paragraph 2 or 3 times, and I wasn't clear whether it was a sort of inward-facing resolving problems within the council, or whether it's a sort of an external helping within the partnership to resolve issues that are within the remit of the council within the partnership, or possibly a bit of both. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what that group will actually do.
Yeah, sure. So the officers who are involved in supporting partners to deliver York Central quite extensive. So we've got obviously we've got transport and highways colleagues, we've got planning colleagues, spatial planning colleagues, community and health colleagues, a range of different officers across council, sustainability, so Sean's involved. And so we've established the internal officer group really to first of all understand what the council needs to do to support delivery of the scheme, and that's working very closely with the different partners to identify issues as they identify them, but also how we can internally sort of resolve some of those issues and untangle some of the knots of the council to try and get things moving along as quickly possible. So by establishing the internal officer group, for example, we have our legal representation as part of that officer group, and we've managed to unlock some of the kind of things that were stuck really around legal issues. For example, the EZ agreement has now been signed, which is of great relief to all of us. So various different things can get resolved a little bit quicker than maybe getting stuck in the council.
Just my acronym alert went off. EZ.
Yeah, very good. Enterprise zone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that a supplementary?
It can be. It was a question about the EZ, so I just thought it would be.
Well, if you hold on to that, we can talk about that in more detail. Did you have another question?
I had another question, not on the same topic.
No, carry on.
Yeah, if that's okay. I just wanted to also understand, so within the outline application, there's a bit of flex in terms of housing numbers and the grade A office space. You've mentioned about the outline stipulates a minimum 20% affordable housing, but I think there's conversations about pushing that number quite considerably higher than 20%, which is obviously really welcome. I specifically was interested in the office space though, and what the current thinking is around the sort of office and retail, because I think obviously outline was pre-COVID. There's been quite a lot of discussion nationally about, working practices and what sort of space we need. And I'm very mindful of there being grade A office space very local to here that's currently empty and has been empty for quite a long time. And obviously what we don't want is to have an enterprise zone that is predicated on money that will be coming in from actually, unless we can realise that, is our loan that we take as a council at risk. So it's just understanding where we think that office space or the retail currently sits within the mix of everything. Thank you.
Who'd like to have a go at that? Tom?
I can try and respond to that. I think, York Central, to deliver really on the aspirations that were set out at the beginning, does have to have that commercial space as well. I think one of the things that York lacks actually is a central business district. So whilst you might refer to some local office space, that's pretty small in its content. And I think to really attract and grow the economy, which is one of the aspirations around the regeneration for York Central, you have to have that quantum of space to create a place. And we've been thinking a lot about what that strategy is around the central business district. So the core focus for us is really looking at industries where York are already doing well, and there is the accretive value of growth around some of those core sectors. So bio and agri-tech, there is rail and AI rail, so the artificial intelligence around rail engineering, and the culture and media tech. So those are some core industries in York that York do well already, but they lack the space to grow, and they lack that modern commercial space where there is maybe a cluster of companies to work off the back of each other. So we see that the office space as a key tool to really grow the York economy and provide the jobs for the future for York residents. I mean, if you look at York as a city, it's got some great qualities, and a lot of that is around, for example, the level of education within York and York City Centre is very high, but actually you see a lot of those graduates leave. There isn't the jobs that we can provide to satisfy. They either go to Manchester or London or Leeds, etc. It's 15%, I think, retention rate. So a lot of what we are aiming to do is creating that ability for those companies to grow, and they need modern office accommodation. I hear what is said about COVID. Actually, I think the pendulum's swinging back a little bit. People are starting to go back to the office. And what we can provide here is very forward-facing, sustainable office accommodation. And that's what we're looking to do, picking up on some of those core industries.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, and that's really helpful. I can completely see the benefit of a sort of a business district and the idea of firms kind of sparking off each other and people seeing a place to work and all of that sort of thing. The anxiety that I have though is that my understanding of one of the issues around some of the high quality office space that's currently unlet in the city is that the floor plate sizes are too big. And it's actually not that big even in itself. So I guess, in a sense, it would be a commercial decision anyway. But are you satisfied as a partnership that there's enough flexibility within what's proposed to be able to flex up and down, not just in terms of the overall amount of square footage that's available, but actually the types of commercial accommodation that will be built, but then also could flex according to what demand is within that as well?
Yeah, I mean, That's our job, effectively. We design something that's going to be appealing to the market. So we undertake a lot of research. We undertake a lot of analysis around all of the data, but also we bring that into the design detail that we bring forward, so that those floor plates are flexible, so you can scale up or scale down, or it can be for, you know, a small number of people or a larger firm. So one of the first buildings that we're looking to bring forward as part of our phase one is an innovation hub, and the idea of that innovation hub is that it can be 1 or 2 people located in there, rather than it just playing into a, you know, 50 or 100 people. So absolutely, the idea is to have flexible office space to appeal to all sectors in the market.
Thank you. Was that supplementary, Councillor Healy?
Very quickly, is the intention to build the office, then find the client, or is it find the client and then build the office? So is it speculative, or is it client led?
Well, we've got ongoing discussions, I think.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, I think it's not. It's fun.
I mean, we're in dialogue with the Combined Authority and the council around delivering an innovation hub as part of our phase one, and that innovation hub would be on the basis of a speculative office building. So it's not looking specifically for a tenant. The idea is to create the space to attract what we talked about earlier, some of those core industries and those smaller startup businesses, so that they can grow organically within that space. So speculative office building.
It plays into the university strengths. So it's being shaped with the University of York, with their research strengths, and therefore with their networks that they already work with. So things like automotive rail, medtech and creative tech and biotech are already well known and recognised strengths of the University of York. So it leans into some of their work.
Thank you. Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for this report. I just want to ask specifically about, it does tie in with the office space, about the civil service hub, or the government hub that's been put together and recently approved. 2,600 civil servants. What's the process going to be for continuing to engage with the government to make sure that this goes to fruition, that civil servant jobs are moved here? Is this in a similar vein to some of the other devolution tactics that are going on, for example, the Treasury campus in Darlington? And who are we specifically engaging with? Are we engaging with a specific civil service department, or is it a wider government initiative? Do we know who's going to come here? And is it tying in with other schemes we've seen about moving the civil service out of London?
Who'd like to have a go at that?
So we are liaising direct with a body called the Government Property Agency. The Government Property Agency acts as an umbrella for all of the various departments that might come to the building. So of those 2,600, whatever it is, personnel, I think the office operates on going to one of the earlier observations, it operates on a 40% occupancy rate. So actually the building can occupy around 1,150 people on a daily basis, but 2,600 use that as their office building, if that makes sense. And the GPA acts on behalf of various government departments, so it might be Treasury, it might be DEFRA, but those are discussions that aren't controlled by us, that's controlled by the GPA.
Yeah, thank you. The question I was going to ask was whether in those discussions there's a review of existing civil service accommodation in York. Obviously, York is already home to a large number of civil servants, but I'm guessing that it's not a discussion you would be privy to.
We're not privy to that, but so the way that the GPA operates is they look at co-locating various government departments to drive efficiency in cost and real estate. So they will take the various departments and put them into one umbrella building, if you like, and we don't know who those departments are going to be. That's to be controlled and run by the GPA, but those discussions will be had by them, and we liaise directly with them in terms of the operation of or the delivery of that specific building.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Whitcroft?
Yeah, I just wanted to check about the 40% occupancy. If that was sort of standard practice across civil servant accommodation, I guess, but also, is there a way of guaranteeing that those civil servants will be in York if we've got only 40% coming into the office? could they still be working from London but have York as their home? I'm not sure whether these are matters for the GPA, but if you've got an answer.
I probably can't give you the answer to that. I only know that it's home to 2,600 employees, but the building operates on a 1,150 basis, 1,150 employees basis.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, I was wondering if I can ask the interim director, in terms of the council's original financial commitments to underpinning bringing this development forward, how are things progressing against the previous intentions in terms of the funding position?
So I'm not even sure when, I'm afraid, long before my time. The council committed something like £10 million to develop this scheme. And of that, we've still got a substantial amount left, which we'll be speaking to the developers about shortly, not all of it, obviously, but in terms of how we can support inward investment activity. So how we can support your occupier strategy and attract the right organisations into the city. That money isn't just for obviously marketing. It covers transport, highways, capacity really to sort out and put the scheme together in the first place, prior to the HIF funding that was awarded to Homes England to build out the infrastructure, and those works are actually evident in Annex B at the moment. The enterprise zone figure isn't part of that. So the enterprise zone, I don't know if I'm picking up on your question, Councillor Eyre. So I'll just talk enterprise zone and then you chip in if I don't answer it. The enterprise zone funding is for 35 million. It's essentially drawing down, if you like, income that we would expect through the enterprise zone, which works similar to business rates but with slightly different rules. And that's going to be provided to Homes England as part of the final stages of the infrastructure round about late summer next year. And we've had the enterprise zone funding agreement approved now, so that provides Homes England and ourselves with the assurity that that's going to take place.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Merritt?
Yes. It might be helpful when we have future updates on this, if we can actually have some statement of the funding position, at least in terms of the council's funding.
Yeah, sure, we
Thank
can
you.
bring that next time. That's no
Thank you.
problem. Just to say as well, so I'll
Yeah.
bring on Lee in a minute, just say the presentation's up. So when you're ready, we're quite happy to, well, we're going to put Tom on the stage to run through some of the developer feedback, so you can see
I've got
that site progression.
A couple of more hands and we'll do the presentation. Yeah. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was around that enterprise zone funding and you're saying around the agreement. So obviously, because that 35 million comes with a cost of probably about £3 million a year revenue cost. I suppose my key questions were, it was originally based on a 19-year payback period. Obviously, that initial agreement of how long the enterprise zone would run doesn't cover that period. So we were looking to extend that. Has that been done? And what is the end date for that now? And then there's a second question after that.
Well, the whole enterprise zone got extended, I think, by 10 years, councillors, but I don't know the actual specifics in terms of the length of the loan.
I couldn't find out what the original end date of the
2054 is how long it's been extended.
Yeah,
Is that the
2054.
question? Yeah,
Yeah.
is that the question? Yeah. So the enterprise zone covers the period from sort of now to 2054. Extended part of the evolution. And we were very fortunate. Oh, sorry, we were very fortunate that happened actually, because we're one of the last local authorities that were able to do that.
And then the second part of that question was, there's use of venture fund in the early years, as some of that business rate income won't come at the beginning of that period. So there was a plan to use venture fund to smooth that over in that period. Is there still adequate funding within that venture fund, given the amount of time until the government hub is opened?
I'm going to have to take that away. I'm not sure, I'm afraid. I don't know.
It's obviously will incur the 35 million, as it says here, quite almost immediately. That government hub won't open for 12 to 18 months. So
Yeah,
the venture fund was the model. So it's just to check what the balance of that venture fund is and whether that covers enough or whether we have to make further allocations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if you can get us an answer on that, that would be fine. I've got Councillor Rose, and then we'll stop and do the presentation, or is that okay? Councillor Rose.
I mean, my questions were about the latest percentage affordability number, the breakdown of affordability housing, and the current latest timelines on a couple of things. And I suspect that's all covered by the presentation. So I'm happy to waive and pick those up if they're not covered.
We'll see the presentation, then we can mop up any unanswered questions. Right. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you. So I'll hand over to Tom, our development partner. Here's the speedy thing. It's up on the screen behind you. So and we'll share it obviously in the report so that everybody gets a copy at home. Knowing how the camera works, if anyone's talking, the camera's on them. I wonder if I could encourage Tom to speak at the top so that the camera's always on you. Is that possible? Sorry.
But and no, we wouldn't be able to hear him
this.
though, would we?
Sorry?
We wouldn't be able to hear him.
Oh, no, that's true. Okay, well, we'll leave it as is. Leave it as is.
Okay, thank you. I mean, this is a brief presentation, but just to give you some context to the last 6 months, which is, I think, or whenever it was, March, when was the last scrutiny review, we were officially appointed as development partners with Homes England at the end of March. Since then, we have undertaken significant public consultation, working with local authority, working with local councillors, working with community groups, and we have appointed design teams around our phase 1 or wider phase 1, which includes a number of elements. First one here you can see is a render of a 200 key hotel and the Western Station entrance, leading out onto what is Coal Drops, or it's commonly known as Coal Drops at the moment, which is a piece of public realm which will be sitting opposite Museum Square, which got consent or reserved matters approval back in February earlier this year, which links into the Central Hall regeneration, which is being undertaken by NRM and also has reserved matters approval. What we bid off, if you like, what was the outline consent was 2,500 homes. I'm not going to read all that, but 1 million square feet of commercial retail space, etc., along with the jobs, the parkland and public realm, and there's the potential value add to the economy of 1.16 billion. I think it was about a 20 or 25% increase in the economic size of York, which goes back to my earlier point around the commercial district being required. And there's the 135 million of infrastructure, which is being undertaken by Homes England and Network Rail at the moment. That's a little bit of a bird's eye view of the latest master plan, where you can see the National Railway Museum in existence. The other buildings are the elements that will be brought forward. I appreciate that this is obviously early design. We haven't done detailed design development, but it gives you a sort of an indicative view of the overall regeneration as a whole. The master plan we inherited is a 2019 outline consent. I think we were asked by, in consultation with Homes England and CYC, to see if we could do more. And it goes back to one of the points that was raised earlier: more housing, more affordable housing, maybe more commercial space to drive that economic benefit as well. And so we've undertaken a bit of an optimization exercise, working within the parameters of the outline consent to see what we can potentially do. So that 2,500 homes we can potentially push to 3,000 homes, and that commercial space we can potentially push from 1 to 1.4 million square feet. So adding that potentially 20% to both housing and commercial space, I think is really important, and it gives us the opportunity to deliver that, on one of the aspirations for us as development partner around more affordable housing and more commercial space to make this a better place for everybody. In terms of phase one, we're currently undertaking the various elements of design within our phase one master plan. There are some different elements to it. We talked about the hotel and the Western Station entrance and the coal drops. We talked briefly about that innovation hub earlier, which is an additional office building of around 100,000 square feet, which will sit next to the government property building as well. So that frames the Museum Square and coal drops quite nicely in terms of a place, and will sit next to the National Railway Museum as well. But the key thing, I think, for our phase one is delivering housing, and we're looking at around 1,000 units of housing across that phase one. There's built to rent, there's shared ownership, there's social rent, there's affordable rent, there's later living. So again, trying to look at all aspects of the housing needs, making sure that it is providing housing for everybody from every station and every age bracket. And every requirement. So we've done some detailed design around those elements, and we're currently going through a pre-app, or starting a pre-app process with the local authority to bring forward a reserved matters application in the middle of 2025. But those 1,000 homes are, I think, are the key driver really, and for CYC and Homes England and ourselves. And then in the heart of that, you can see is the green space. So as part of our phase one, we'll also be bringing forward the majority of the public park. The public park is around 18 acres. I think we're bringing forward around 14 of it in the first phase. So again, the idea is to create a place from the very start so that those houses sit around that public space, and that public space is accessible to all, not just the residents. So that's where we are. I mean, we're in early stages of discussion with the council. We've got all the design teams now driving forward on the various elements, with the idea that we put that application in probably Q2 of 25. And that will give us the ability then to get on site in 2026 and deliver these homes and communities and the retail and commercial space in 2028. I'm just going to show you can see there the scale of York Central. I think it's about just over 60% of the historic walled city in terms of its scale and size. So a real opportunity to make a huge impact on the economy and the homes and the housing and the community and the people of York. I won't talk long too much on this, but those are the sort of 5 core principles that we base everything on in terms of our engagement, in terms of our design, in terms of our aspirations. It's making sure that those 5 key pillars run through everything that we do. I mean, they're pretty self-explanatory: people, place, planet, partnership, prosperity. But happy to take questions on those if so desired. Just a couple of early renders of some of the elements. That's the public park that we talked about earlier. An image of some of the housing that we're looking to deliver as part of the phase one. Another image of the affordable housing element. Some later living that we're delivering as part of the phase one, so that over 55 specific residential element. Some build to rent, and that's the GPA, which got reserved matters approval back in July of this year. And the office building, this is an very early render, but what we're trying to do is, in terms of that innovation hub, and goes back to the planet as part of our pillar, We are looking to create the most sustainable office building within the UK. So really driving down embedded carbon and making sure that our operational carbon is exceptionally low as well. So that at the moment is looking at a completely timber framed building, which I think will be really great if we can produce that exemplar space, and looking at some very high standards around, as I say, that embedded and operational carbon piece. I won't bore you with the technicalities around, but if you want to ask the questions, I can answer them. And then the hotel that we talked about, which is a 200 key hotel. And I think a really important part of that, as well as the new Western Station entrance, which sits next to it, which I think you can just see, the big archway to the right of that hotel. That's a key piece of infrastructure, I think, from our perspective, and then leads into Museum Square and gives that lovely ability for footfall to run through the station and into the York Central and the wider regeneration. This is the Railway Museum Central Hall, which already has consent, and part of the Museum Square that sits in front of it that already has reserved matters approval. And as you can see there, that's a little bit of a better render on the new Western Station entrance, which will lead into, well, hopefully everybody knows where that is at the moment, but at the moment you've got those steps down from that fairly rickety bridge. So not ideal in terms of being DDA compliant. And pretty poor access. So that absolutely has to be an exemplar piece from my perspective to really sort of act as the gateway for the wider York Central regeneration. So a fairly whistle stop, but hopefully gives you a little bit of a flavour of what we're doing.
Thank you very much. So I'll go back to Councillor Rose to pick up where he left off.
Thank you. Yeah, just the first one I'll just take it as a bucket, which is the 20% affordable housing. Obviously, that was what was originally sought, I guess. What's the latest in looking at increasing that number? I know that's been something that we've been very keen on as a council, and particularly different types of affordability. I know that affordable doesn't really mean anything to those of us in the room. It's just said all the time for prices that nobody can actually afford. So what level of truly affordable, what types of shared ownership, all those different types of bits and pieces?
I think we recognise the challenge that York has. So working with Homes England and CYC, we are very keen to drive that affordable level. 20%, as you say, is what's required under the planning. I think ideally, we all want to see that doubled, and that's the aspiration from our side. And it's not just affordable under the terms of the planning, which is, I think, 80% of open market rent. Actually, that's not really that affordable. So we're going beyond that and talking about social rent and shared ownership, and really driving down the cost of housing within York. Now we can only do that with Homes England as a partner. So I know Liam can probably jump in here, but they're being very supportive in that process, because obviously that has an impact in terms of level of grant that we need to get as well. But we've had very good conversations with CYC and Homes England in terms of increasing that level of affordability and the percentage of affordable as well.
Leon, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just come on there. So for those that are aware, the affordable housing programme is going to go to the spending review next year. So as an agency, we don't yet know what that pot will be. But with the direction of the central government, there's a real big focus on affordable housing and social rented housing as well. So we are expecting there to be a programme. We don't know how much is going to be in that programme, but we're not waiting around, just sitting around doing nothing. So we're having engaging conversations with Tom and Tom's partner, Alan, with our senior affordable housing team. So we're there to support the team. It's one of our flagship schemes. So we'll do everything we can to make sure that we can direct additionality in terms of affordable housing towards York Central. That's something we're really, really keen to do. So we'll watch this space, but again, until a bit like the GPA, and until the spending review and things like that are announced, your sort of hands are a little bit tired to a certain extent. But rest assured, there's lots of open dialogue happening with Tom and with Homes England's affordable housing team.
So I've got a couple of supplementary questions on affordables. We'll take those and I'll come back to Councillor Rose. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. And I'm just going to slightly caveat what I say in so much as the chair of the planning committee. I just want to be a little bit careful about what I ask now and in what context. But if the additional affordable housing is, because you mentioned about possibly flexing the overall number up to potentially up to 3,000 dwellings from the 2,500, and if that's done to sort of facilitate that additional affordable sort of tenure mix and what have you, there's obviously then an implication for the infrastructure that goes alongside that. And I know, you know, at Outline, there were discussions before the Outline application came forward around whether or not the site would warrant you know, a primary school, for example, or a GP practice, or those sort of services that we know are quite stretched in the whole city, really. What is the thinking in terms of delivering that additional affordable housing? Is that dependent on increasing the overall number of dwellings? And if the overall number of dwellings does change, is there an implication then for the infrastructure that might come alongside that?
We certainly aren't looking at, as an agency, we'd like to see more housing. That's evident, but we don't want to sort of break the jelly mold of the outline consent. So we're very supportive of the developer seeking to increase density where possible. And our support for additional affordable housing isn't predicated on just getting more on the site. So even if we stay as we are with the planning consent up to 2,500 homes, we as an agency would still like to support more than 20% affordable housing.
Okay. And sorry, an infrastructure, because I guess it's two part, isn't it? Because there is also, so separate from affordable, there's a conversation obviously going on about possibly flexing up the number overall.
Yeah. No.
Sorry, thank you. So at the moment, all of those things are picked up, apart from the health, which isn't picked up in the Section 106 agreement. Things like school, there's assessments that are done throughout the development. If it's possible to do something on site, it's done on site. If not, there's various contributions. So that was all made very clear to the developer as part of the procurement process. So the developer is very well aware of those situations, and they have to be continually monitored throughout the development, which, you know, is a 10 to 15 year project overall. So
thank you. Councillor Healy, did you have a supplementary on that issue?
Oh, you go
So
first.
no, if you go first.
So I was just going to mention about health. So health is a live conversation, and we're continuing to discuss with health colleagues what their needs for the site are. So the original thinking was the health needs for the immediate residents, but actually, given the size of the site and the connectivity, we're talking about actually, are there opportunities for more community services, etc., within the plot? And that's a very live conversation, but that is definitely something that we're thinking of and working really closely with, particularly Integrated Care Board, the primary care networks and dental around.
Councillor Healy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Probably for Tom again, sorry. In terms of sequencing and the design of the housing, if you only get told next year you'll get your funding settlement from the government, because if you push up the affordable, you tend to make smaller units, so you'd have to change the design. So does that work then if you get told 20% today, 40% next year? Are you going to have to do like a big redesign exercise?
You're partly correct, but we've been encouraged by Homes England, and kick me under the table, Leon, but to design on the basis that we do get that additional affordable. So we are running the design process around providing more affordable at the moment, and we've been told to continue to do that. So I think that would say to me that they're fairly confident that things are going to go in the right direction, but clearly we still have to wait for that spending review to complete. That sort of ties in with our aspiration around a reserve matters application in end of June next year. So by that time, there should be some clarity around the housing grant pot, and that can filter through then, so that we're bringing forward a reserve matters which aligns with that outcome.
So just worth clarifying, so the current affordable housing programme, which was boosted by an additional 500 million, recently runs to 26, so March 26. So the spending review will be announcing what the new affordable housing programme is from April 26 onwards. So at the moment, the development doesn't actually qualify for the current affordable housing because you have to have stock built by 26. So yeah, it is all eyes on 26 onwards, which would then be focused on this project. It's that programme that would kind of work with this project in terms of the timescales.
Thank you. I'll come back to Councillor Rose in case there's anything else he wants to follow up, and I've got lots of hands.
Yeah, I've got one more substantive, but a very quick supplementary on the sequencing and time that you just mentioned. That the 40%, I mean, ideally more than 40%, but let's say 40%-ish affordability piece. In terms of phase one specifically, is that also looking at that sort of number, or is this going to be trickle through ramping up over time?
So it relates to not just the whole site, but phase one as well. So that phase one, our aspiration is to bring forward that level of affordable housing as well. Again, I've just caveat it by saying it's subject to, but I think everybody here, all of the partners and stakeholders want to do that. So as long as we get the response that we need from HE, we can deliver that aspiration.
Fully understood and appreciative of that vision. If you're able to get the pickup of the phase one on the screen again, very briefly, if that's doable. Is it possible to get the presentation just up for a sec, or is that okay? Thank you. Cheers. There's a bit in the paper that talks about timeframes and talks about this spring and some infrastructure work, and I think that ties into the Lehman Road stopping up and the trunk roads. If we hop back to the phase one master plan slide, because it's the easiest way of looking at it. It's all right. There we go. So I just wanted to, I guess, two things. One is more a general point, which is that beautiful square at the bottom is the one or is at the top, that is the back of the station, hotel and NRM entrance to the top right gap there, right? It's the bottom middle or the top right where the road. Sorry. I'm going to make the same point either way, but it's good for understanding.
Can you describe the bit you're referring to?
This is the bridge. Currently runs over platform 11. There'll be a new bridge put in and a new Western Station entrance in here. This is then the 200 key hotel we talked about, which will be fronting onto coal drops, piece of public ground, which we can show you back on later. This is another commercial building, which is the innovation hub, which you also talked about. This is the GPA building, and here we have Museum Square, which sits in front of the NRM in Central Ford. This then is housing. So there's around 500 built to rent units here. There's about 150 later living units here. Public park, around 17 acres, and around 400 affordable, social and affordable housing. It's just over 1,000 homes as part of that. Is that helpful?
It is helpful. It leads into my question, which is, well, I guess the first point is that square at the top right is dissected with a main road where cars will be queuing up to go through the railway bridge / tunnel on the way into town. So the artistic visions on some of those concept arts are lacking a stationary traffic set potentially. But the question I had was, when we're closing off the Lehman Road, what alternate route is going to be in place? My understanding is it goes through a bit of the middle of this, but is that correct or not?
We're not.
It's understanding
We're not really meant
the
to get into
timings
the
of
sort
spring.
of detail of the sort of design. But if you'd like
It's
to
just for what's going to be open in spring.
if
When
you'd like
we're
to
closing
return
the Lehman Road.
to your seat and answer that question so everyone at home can hear it, that would be fine.
It was what got planning consent in 2019. So the whole new link road will be in situ now, and hopefully from some of the photographs in the pack, you would have seen some of that aerial footage. So hopefully all the blacktop will be down by Christmas. So it's exactly how it was envisaged, went to public inquiry a long time before I was involved in the project. So there's no changes from what's always been
So before Lehman Road closes, that's the entire trunk road from the water end
No, not from
junction,
water
right at
end.
the top left,
No,
all
not
the
from-
way through.
Not from water end, no. No, it's being phased. I can't really explain that plan, but
Thank you.
Thanks, Sergeant.
Let's move on. Councillor Taylor's been waiting very patiently.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report and your answers so far. I've got a couple of questions and a couple of things to say, if I may, Chair. The first thing is to pick up on your comments, Claire, about conversations with health partners. Appreciate probably very early days, but at risk of stating the obvious, it isn't always obvious in sort of council life. Please involve relevant ward councillors and communities at the earliest possible stage. Sometimes when these things get legs, it can be difficult to turn them around if need be. And other partners' versions of efficiencies and opportunities might be different to how residents read that. Other thing to say, Chair, is that I think the dialogue with the relevant partners and the ward, Holgate ward, has improved significantly, and I want to put that on record. Very grateful for it, because it's not always been easy. So thank you all, and I apply that to the Railway Museum as well. That's not hell freezing over somewhere, I can assure you. But today's news about increased access is very much appreciated. There are still lots of issues, and there's probably some things we'll never agree on, but an extra 4.5 hours at key times in the day will make a material difference to many lives every single day once the museum's new building opens. So thank you for that. Which leads to my first question. And Tom, you might not be able to commit either way tonight, but it'd be really helpful if at this point we can now establish an ongoing conversation with ward councillors and the museum to make sure that we don't end up in a place that we've been in previous years. This should mark a turning point. I don't expect an answer. You can respond if you wish. But it'd be good for the museum to have something set up with ward councillors. The council leader has been very helpful, but we might not always have a helpful council leader, and we haven't always had a helpful council leader in the last 6 years that I've been a councillor. And I say that with respect, it's been a nightmare. So hopefully we can have an ongoing dialogue. If you want to comment on that when I've finished, you're very welcome to. My other question is, you might see it as trivial, Chair, but I don't. Conscious of the weather that we've been experiencing, I think it would be really helpful moving forward to have these artist impressions when the weather's awful. It might make residents sort of see it as being in their city a bit more, and it might also test the genuine appeal of some of these grand designs that we'll be entertaining. It'd be interesting to see what that looks like when it's pouring down, and I'm only like joking by 10%. It's a semi-serious suggestion. And my final question, Chair, is about the 150k to the York Community Fund, which I know McLaren Arlington have committed. This is obviously very welcome, and we've talked about it a lot in our own catch-ups, and I'm aware that you guys are keen to see that money benefit the community around the site. So if you don't have the answer now, that's fine, but it would be good to get a commitment from you guys to assess how much of that money is going to community projects around the area moving forward. I'm not just talking about Holgate Ward either. The area around the site covers more than just one ward, but the York Community Fund covers a massive area. It's under huge demand from all sorts of charities doing great things across the city. But if the intention behind that money is to try and support the local area around the site, there needs to be a control on that. And, you know, if we're after reassurance on that, really. I think that's
Okay.
me, Chair. Thank you.
So I don't know if Tom Devine, you want to pick up the question about sort of NRM relationships, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Colin, for the question. I'm here this evening in place of Robin Dodsworth, the Transformation Director from the Railway Museum. Unfortunately, he's got COVID. If she was here tonight, I know she'd respond directly to your question, but as the hired helper, I need to take that question back to base. But I'm sure Robin will be in touch with you as soon as she's back in the saddle.
Okay. Point about visuals. I think it's point well made in terms of it's not always sunny and
I
summer.
can certainly ask our CGI
Yeah.
people to have a look at a miserable day in York as well.
Yeah, so 3:30 on a wet November afternoon. What's the vibe? And in terms of the sort of community fund, I don't know whether
Yeah, I
there
can
were
probably
strings
answer that
attached to any
more,
money that you may have donated.
The whole purpose of that, Callum, as you know, was to, sorry, Councillor Taylor, was to make sure that we did impact on the local community. So we had a very clear directive to 2 ridings. So it doesn't sit just under 2 ridings, it's a specific York Central fund. And we have scrutiny over, to a degree, over what that is delivered. Now we have to be one step removed, but we are involved in, if you like, consulted on what that is invested in and how that money is distributed. So it was a very clear direction at the get-go, what that should be targeted at. And we will have that scrutiny as we go through, or ability to look at what goes through. So be rest assured that is the intent, and we will make sure that we continue to drive it in that direction as well.
Thank you. Right, we'll carry on down the list. Councillor Vassey.
Thank you, Chair. When I first raised these issues at a previous meeting of York Central, the partnership showed great enthusiasm for making real ambition regarding the environmental sustainability of this site. The report doesn't say anything really about the construction of buildings for whatever reason. Has progress been made? How many of the 2,500 homes and what percentage of the employment space on the site will be built to passive house standard? And I raise that because we've heard about affordability. And by definition, houses and offices built to passive house standard are more affordable than other homes to heat and to live in.
Who would like to have a go at that?
That's my first question.
Okay.
I can take that, Chair.
Yeah.
Sustainability is a particular focus and passion for me and for the partnership. We are looking to drive an exemplar project. It's a very easy word to say, exemplar, but we have embedded within our teams, design teams, higher than market facing aspirations around sustainability. So we submitted a proposal way back when we got selected. And if you like, that is our baseline. Let's call it a bronze standard, although it's very high standard. We are aiming for a gold standard in terms of sustainability. So we talked earlier around the commercial building, making that the greenest office building within the UK, looking at and I can get into technicalities now, but a LETI 2030 target. So that's 350 kilograms of carbon per metre squared. A typical office building in today's market is around 475 kilograms of carbon metre squared. So you can see a significant improvement upon that. And then that's just on the commercial side. In terms of passive house, all of the housing will be delivered on the principles of passive house. And I say the principles because passive house is a badge and it's a process. Actually, I think you can do slightly better than that around some of the design elements. So it's the principles of passive house, but making sure that that operational carbon is reduced significantly. When I say operational carbon, it's mean the heating and the power and the use of energy, etc., to keep those houses going. So that is a real aspiration for us to make these the greenest housings that are around in the marketplace, going beyond passive house in terms of that terminology, but really thinking about the design of it and the embedded carbon and the materiality and the circular economy, thinking about where those materials come from. Every aspect that we do in terms of that design, going back to our 5 pillars, is about the planet. You know, that is one of our core pillars in what we're trying to deliver. So we've got to tread as lightly as possible on the planet in delivering this regeneration. And that's also about construction methodology. It's about transportation of materials. It's about the design. Everything is always, we're always thinking about the planet. So be rest assured that it's a personal passion of mine to make sure this is as sustainable development as we can possibly deliver.
Leon, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. And as an agency, sustainability is one of our key performance indicators as well, which sits within our strategic plan for 23 to 28. So the agency itself has its own department that looks after sustainability. And we have a sustainability passport, which is quite rigid. We had a meeting with Tom's colleagues on that last week with our team, which I sat in to make sure that all the right languages have been spoken. And I can honestly say the team came out very, very pleased with what they heard. Probably the best meeting that we've had with any developers so far. So really, really impressive. Off to a great start. And having worked doing Tom's job effectively a few years ago on the other side of the fence, some of the aspirations that Tom wants to deliver is really right up there. So for me personally, I'm very passionate about it as well. So we are, as an agency, keeping a keen eye on the developer as well, as to make sure that they do deliver on what they said and what they say.
Thank you. Did you have a second question?
Yeah, if I could just
Yeah.
respond as a quick question. So I'm glad to hear that. And as I said, when I started, I noted your enthusiasm last time. In respect to that, I'm just keen to know whether you've visited Barnstadt in Heidelberg, because seeing your plan there reminded me that the Barnstadt site in Heidelberg is almost identical to our teardrop site. It's the same shape, it's the same size, it's now finished, but it's got homes for 3,000 homes, employment for 6,000 people. The comparators are so clear, and it's all built to passive house standards. So if you haven't seen it, I just hope you will have time to make that comparison, because it's uplifting to see that. My second question relates to this, Chair. Quickly, what we didn't see in what was put in front of us was any sense of how communities are going to exist within this setup. So we've seen there's housing area, there's a business area. One of the characteristics that I see in Heidelberg and saw when I visited was ensuring that there are cafes and things within the housing areas so that people can walk to have social time and things like that. And we've seen a tendency in recent years for pubs to all disappear and housing to be completely isolated from the rest of a city. So I'm just keen to know what's being done to do that, and whether there's going to be a primary school involved, or whether there's fresh facilities. What community facilities are going to exist both in the office area and in the housing area?
So I'm not expecting you to preempt the Reserve Matters application and go into details to what it will look. But in terms of the vision, if you could briefly set out how you think it'll work. Thank you.
I think you've raised a very pertinent point in that to create communities, you need all of that additional space, whether it's retail, whether it's leisure, whether it's a public open park, whether it's et cetera, et cetera. So we are undertaking a cultural strategy. We're undertaking a retail strategy, because we absolutely agree with all of what you've just identified. And I am aware of the project, and I'd love to go and visit. So hopefully I can get the time to do so. But yeah, it is one of those examples that we have taken some information from. I mean, there are a number of really exemplar regenerations. They seem to do it very well in Europe. So we know we're looking at all of those exemplar projects and trying to improve upon that. But in terms of that retail and that leisure and that community space, 100%, we've got, it's got to be an integral part of it. Is, this isn't just about the buildings, it's the spaces between the buildings. That's just as important. It's that glue that keeps everything together. And going back to communities, you only get communities really if you provide all of those spaces and you provide all of the different types of housing. So this hasn't got to feel like an oasis of privilege. This has got to make sure that it's feeding into all communities and all walks of life and all age groups, so that you can get all of that interaction. And that's really, when we're thinking about this as a place, again, one of our key pillars, we are thinking about all of those communities and what they need from a day-to-day use. So, well, I mean, I could go on for hours about this. I'm very happy to have a separate meeting if you want to. But, you know, when we're thinking about that place, we think of it in terms of the life of a resident, the life of an office worker, the life of a visitor. What do they need? What do they need to have? What do they want to see? What's their experience as they go through that place? And it's making sure that everything's there in the locality to make sure that they can exist, enjoy, and be part of that community on a day-to-day basis. So it is right up there in terms of our agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Burton.
Thanks. I was going to ask quite a lengthy question about delivery, but I think it's quite a technical one, so I think I'll just take it offline because there's been a lot that's been asked today. So I'll stick to a more pertinent question, which is, we aren't actually going to call it cold drops, are we? Because that's just been done at King's Cross about 3-4 years ago. Is that a placeholder or a legitimate?
I'm just referring to as what it was. It was cold drops, but that isn't the end.
Good. Okay.
That's a sort of placeholder name. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. 3 hopefully quick questions. The 6,500 new jobs in the slide, could you just set out how many of those are temporary construction based jobs and how many are likely to be permanent jobs for the longer term for residents? I had a second question, which hopefully is also relatively straightforward, about the safety along the railway lines, which obviously border the outside of the site, and just what that meant in terms of the transition points between existing residents and the new site. And then finally, just picking up on Councillor Taylor's question about councillors, just what was happening in terms of keeping particularly the very local residents informed about what was happening and whether there was likely to be any other wider compensation in terms of the inconvenience that residents will be caused during the period of the works, whether that's via councillors or whether that's something that can happen directly, particularly to those residents that are particularly close to the development sites. Thanks.
Thank you. So the first question around the nature of the 6,500 jobs.
Yeah, I'll take on the chair. So that metric was first brought about on the basis of the planning for up to 1 million square feet. So that could ebb and flow. Clearly, the more commercial you do over and above that, the more jobs. I think that was actually quite a low figure based on 1 million square feet. But obviously, the developers in control of the development side. But that's where that number came from. It was a metric based on permanent. That was based on permanent jobs. That wasn't taking into account construction jobs during construction. That was permanent jobs.
Yeah, so that's post construction. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the question around railway safety.
Yeah, the safety of the railway lines. Yeah.
So there's a phased approach here, just because the whole scheme can't be delivered at once. So under the infrastructure that's currently been delivered by Homes England, in accordance with the reserve matters consent that's in place, a replacement rail link is being provided that will go from near the Water End Bridge all the way down to the National Railway Museum South Yard. And in those initial infrastructure works, it's going to have a 1.83 metre high weld mesh fence along each side of it to keep it safe and stop people accidentally walking across it. But that's very much a sort of a placeholder vision. In a later phase, when Tom's team of designers are looking at the park, they will be able to consider other more visually attractive ways of demarking the railway line and keeping it safe from, children with balls or people walking their dogs, what have you. But for now, to deliver the railway line in the first phase and to get Office of Road and Rail approval for it, which is the safety regulator for rail operated and guided systems, it's got fencing. But the museum is looking forward to working with Tom and his design team as the park design comes forward to see if there's a way to make it safe without that style of fencing.
Councillor Bowles?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's not just about the fence itself. I suppose it's just about the wider perception of you're suddenly putting buildings that people would be accessing regularly next to a railway line when previously there didn't used to be any buildings there. There's a kind of education piece there around making sure that people are probably more train line aware than they might otherwise have been previously when there was nothing, no one had any cause to go there. So just whether or not there was a wider piece around schools or, again, interaction with the community, just around the safety and the importance of, or just the danger of that being a railway line.
Thank you. It's a really good suggestion. We'll take it away. In terms of the actual rail link, it will first come into use over the level crossings in the spring of next year when the highways open, but rail won't run along it until at least later in 2026. So we will take your suggestion on board along with the ORR and consult with ward members as well, and come up with an approach that you think is going to work well for your residents in terms of highlighting the rail link to them.
Thank you. And then a question around communication with local residents and what vehicles will be used to proactively do that.
Again, going back to one of our or a number of our pillars, which are people and partnership, it is absolutely our intent, and hopefully, well, Councillor Taylor has recognised a little bit some of the work that has been done over the last 6-7 months, but this has got to be in dialogue with the communities around, not just the local ward members, local ward council areas, but also the wider York City. So it is really key to us that we bring people along that journey. So we've already undertaken some consultation, and there will be regular consultation going forward as we bring that phase 1C planning process forward. That's got to be in conjunction with local communities, and we need to make sure that that's carried on through the development process as well, and that's our intent. We will be setting out, I mean, we've been liaising with CYC and NRM and Homes England and National Network Rail around communication strategy to make sure that everything is communicated properly, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. It was a possibly quick question about delivery. So I won't hold you to these numbers, obviously, and I doubt very many of us will be around at the end of this process to discover whether you were right or not, but did a quick scan on what the original sort of local plan forecast was in terms of delivery for this site. So starting this year, ironically, up 45 and delivering probably around 1,800 over the 14-year period. When do you think you might be able to start on site, assuming a reasonable planning process, and how many homes a year do you think? So it started at about 100 up to about 150 peak per annum delivery. Do you think that's achievable? Do you think you'll be able to deliver more?
Our aspiration, I think, just as we were outlining earlier, is a lot more than that, Councillor Eyre. So our phase 1 application, which we're looking to bring forward in June of next year, will identify 1,000 residential units, and that will then be delivered over a 2-year period, so from 26 to 28. So those 1,000 homes will be there at the end of 2028 is the current programme.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, obviously the railway lines heavily constrain the site, and the basic access will be north west to south east. The original proposals obviously also included a potential an improved western active travel access to Wilton Rise. The current bridge is, shall we say, certainly not very cycle friendly, and not really designed for large volumes of pedestrian traffic either. But that will provide, once improved, a very attractive route linking to the west and southwest of the city, as a whole. When are you likely to bring the plans forward for that, both in terms of the planning proposals and then eventual construction?
Leon?
I'll take that, councillor Merritt. So Stephen Hines can't be here this evening from Network Rail, but Network Rail's team, in-house team, have been working on some designs for the new Wilton Rise Bridge, because I think we all agree it needs vast improvement. It's completely unacceptable. So there's a condition in the planning that we need to do that as well. So we've been working hard on the designs. There has been some consultation events on that. As far as I'm aware, Network Rail are looking to bring that forward. I think it's sort of September-ish time for planning. So there's going to be more consultation happening. So rest assured, there's been lots of work going on in the background for that. So yeah, fingers crossed, sort of September, October time. I've got a meeting with them this week, later on in the week, so I can ask them again. But that was the latest we had, Councillor Merritt, when I last spoke to them. But yeah, positive, good progress being made in the background.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Healy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Two short questions. You mentioned the timber framed office building. Is it the timber framed office building? Is it the intention to use that construction method only for that one office or for the entirety of the site? So that's one question. Second question is, car parking, is it underground or is it on the level?
In answer to your first question, the aspiration is that we do that through the whole development. I think, that learning curve that you take on the first phase, you want to expand on that and take it through to the next phases. So going back to my earlier comments around sustainability, that isn't just a one go, that is through the whole development. So very much the aspiration to do that through the whole scheme.
Okay.
And that applies not just to the commercial, but to the residential as well. It's making sure that sustainability is at the heart of everything that we do for the whole redevelopment, not just the first phase. On the second one, and I think going in part to the sustainability point, we see there's a real opportunity to make this a car light development. And the council have obviously declared a climate emergency. I think we all recognise that there are challenges with the environment, so we want to do our part in that as well. And we think part of that is to make this a more sustainable location in terms of its development. So looking at that modal shift away from car to more sustainable travel modes. So we're looking to, and that's obviously got to go through a planning process and discussion with the local authority, but looking to make this car light. So removing car parking as much as possible from the project.
Thank you. I've got one final hand with Councillor Widdowson.
Can I take you back to the innovation hubs? And just expand, it's not a question, it's just give me a little bit more flavour and detail as to how that's going to work, because I can see that really driving the city, for the whole of the city's economy and changing it.
I can, thank you, Councillor Wilson. I mean, I probably could talk a long time at that, so apologies. But we talked about really focusing on particular core industries that York already do well, but could do better. And so that's the bio and agri-tech, that's the rail engineering and AI around rail, and the culture and media tech. Those are already good industries that York do, but they haven't got the space to really capitalize upon that IP, and they need space to be able to do that. So the idea of the innovation hub is to create that cluster where those startups, where it comes out of university, whether it's individuals bringing that forward, that those industries can co-locate and bounce ideas off. So that innovation hub, it's 100,000 square feet, which is a big office building, that is really imperative to really driving the economy we see within York and North Yorkshire. So we've been doing a lot of work with the combined authority as well about their growth plans, making sure it aligns in conjunction with their aspirations, which it thankfully does, and focusing, as I say, on creating that place where that innovation can really drive. So working with the universities, St John's and York University, working with the Combined Authority, working with the council, all of those key stakeholders are imperative to making that work. But we see that as a real, great start to driving the rest of the commercial development and making sure that those core industries really get driven as hard as they can.
Thank you. And one last question from Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you. I appreciate. I've had a couple of questions, and we've done a lot of a lot of discussion on this. It was just a quick thing that sort of pops into my mind as we were talking. So, at the outline stage, and I believe sort of afterwards, but I've not been as closely involved in discussions over the last year or two. The strip of land that's between the Spine Road and the railway line on the freight bypass line is currently York Yard South, which is sort of holding sidings. And my recollection was that Network Rail were retaining the right to keep that as an active railhead, and that they may release it. I think the aspiration was that they would release it, and there was quite a bit of the housing that was, the outline shows it being on that site. Have they now released that land, or have they given you at least an indication that their intention is still to do so?
It's not released yet, but yeah, very much so. It will be released in the future. My understanding is that Network Rail are in discussions with Freightliner at the moment, effectively to move them from where it is now to further north up the track. So I guess you'd call that Freightliner, but York Yard North even. But no, those discussions are still ongoing, and I believe they've started some of the processes in terms of the ORR, LC17 consents, etc. So that is all working away in the background. So yes, that is progressing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members, for your questions. Thank you, Tom and Leon and Claire for fielding our questions. I think in terms of our next update, we can have a discussion as to when would be the best time for. We'll assume a 6-month basis, but if there's a decision point or a particular issue that's worthy of discussion at a particular point in time, we can flex that. But hopefully it's been useful for you to hear some of the questions that members have. Obviously, it's a scheme that I think everyone's very keen to see come to fruition, regardless of whether you live next to the site or many miles away. But thank you for your attendance and your participation, and thank you. I suggest we have a brief comfort break, and it's 6:57. Reconvene no later than 5 past. Thank you. Councillor Vassie with. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So we now move on to agenda item 6, finance and performance monitor 2. And we're joined by Debbie Mitchell and Ian Cunningham. So just by way of a reminder, so this is a report that was considered by executive on the 14th of November. The version of the report that we've received is tailored for the services that are within the remit of this committee. So I would ask members to focus any questions they have on paragraphs 18 to 31 and the detailed annexes provided. So that's my stock reminder whenever we have finance and performance monitors. But I'll invite Debbie and Ian to make any introductory remarks they wish.
Thank you. As you said, this is the second monitoring report of the current financial year, and it was presented to executive last month. As you said, it highlights the main forecast variations. It's not much different actually to the report we brought you a month ago. We've outlined the variations. It's really not that different. We're forecasting an overspend still, but that's much improved from previous years. In fact, huge improvement from the 11 million we were forecasting last year. And that there are no real variances to report within the corporate area. So I don't know whether Ian wants to comment on the performance.
Just quickly, the committee asked last time for benchmarking around energy performance certificates. We've included that within the report, which shows we're about the same as national and about the same as regional. We've provided some carbon emissions data outside of the report, some of the committee members for the last year, which shows that we're in 2021 have levels that are equivalent to pre-COVID really for carbon emissions for the city. The committee asked last time for the number of FOIs that were no responses or currently in progress. We've included those on the scorecards as requested, and the performance measures are roughly the same place as when we brought them last time to the committee.
Thank you for that. So members, mindful of it's only over a month since we received the previous report, and there is, thank you first of all, Ian, for including the additional information that was requested. Do members have any comments they wish to raise, any questions? Councillor Rose.
I've got a few on the table of KPIs, but I'll ask the other bit first. I mean, firstly, great that looking at the Corporate Central Services Directorate, we've got 700k underspend for this year compared to original budget. Love to see it when it happens. And then the specific number I just wanted to call out in paragraph 25 on page 31 is the nitrogen dioxide concentration down to 38.8. I think I've asked this question before, but what does that mean in terms of good or bad? It's the lowest we've ever had it on the numbers that I can find. But the nitrogen dioxide concentration of 38.8, I don't know if that's back under where it should be statutorily or if that's still problematic or not. I don't know if you can answer that question or not, but.
I think fortunately we have someone in the room who may know the answer to that if you want to come to the table.
I won't drop a minute. I'm not sure I completely know the answer, whether it's a good direction on travel or not. I'll speak to the relevant person in the Public Protection Department who deals with air quality and see if I can get a written reply for you. Okay.
Thanks. Yes, I mean, it's a good news story either way. It's the lowest it's ever been. I'm keen to know how close it is to where we need it to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one from me. It's regarding paragraph or section 31 about the customer centre average speed of answer. Hopefully not a huge request, but I wonder if in future we could work in a line that says sort of how many incidents there were of callers waiting over 1 hour and 2 hours, because they're the things that really put people off bothering in the future. And certainly the type of thing that really gets under my skin, because I've been in the receiving end of it a few times. But you know, because that average is obviously positive, really positive when you compare it to a lot of big companies that you call to discuss your bills or what have you. But it'd be good to see how we're performing in those worst case scenarios, which has been a talking point in the last 2 or 3 years, I think.
Of course, that's something we can do. Can maybe have a look at the top 10% and the bottom 10% and look at the calls waiting times for those. So it's not just the mean level. And I'll put that in the next report. Okay.
And I know we do have a sort of customer experience agenda item on our kind of wish list to come back, hopefully in the new municipal year. So that's something that we can sort of pick up as part of a broader discussion would be good. But I think that probably the likely timing for that would be, May at the earliest, I think. Councillor Eyre.
It was just sort of follow up onto that one. In terms of that, is that just the speed at which it's answered or the speed with which it gets through to where it's supposed to get to? So is it a case of, for example, we're answering the phone within a minute and then people are sitting on hold for 10 minutes while they get put through to highways? If so, that we might need more information in terms of.
So I'm pretty sure it's as answered at the customer centre, and then there will be potentially another period of waiting if it passes on to another department. We keep phone traffic for all of the teams within the council, so we could look at some specific places. So if the committee had a concern such as it was getting caught at the highways department afterwards, we could look into that.
Yeah, it'd be helpful to understand that. I'd always assumed it would be the entry point into what may be other systems before you get to speak to somebody or get the information you want through an automated message, which means you don't need to speak to somebody. But useful to unpack that a bit. Councillor Rose?
Yeah, just the question I had about the same thing was actually it's marked as neutral trend, but it's gone from 42 seconds to 65, and it was only 13 seconds last year. So bundling in with all of that, I think it shows that it merits coming back to this committee with more detail at some point.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Merritt.
Yeah, it was just on that because obviously there's been a massive deterioration, hasn't there, over that very brief period from, as sort of being said, it's doubled the response time. Why has that been so bad?
So is that response time from 23-24 through to further quarters? I think we discussed that, I think, at the last committee, that we had quite a lot of calls coming to the authority for garden waste when that scheme was launched, and that pushed up the times within that quarter. Obviously, work's been done as the authority to reduce those number of calls and to potentially, I'll leave it at that for a second.
Okay, that's right. Well, I'm just subbing tonight, so I wasn't able to catch the last one on the webcast, gutting me.
Yeah.
So presumably people analyse the calls today, for why people are ringing. Because I mean, even if we're at 1 minute and 5 seconds, it wouldn't particularly concern me. It's not, like some of these companies, it just can't get through. But do we proactively analyse why people are calling to try and save them for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not the head of customer services, so I can't give all of the answers, but within the department, they have quite a lot of operational management information that they look at each week, looks at the waiting times for the calls, looks at the number of people going through different call lines and where they need to supply further information, advice, support and guidance on the website. They look at people who come into the customer centre and all the different queues that are there. We provide them weekly management information that goes to a wide suite of individuals to have a bit of a think about where they need to do some service improvement.
Councillor Lomas?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, we also have a system of looking at where we might need to put more resource in for specific events, specific things that are happening, or where we see a pinch point in terms of the increase in calls. So it's definitely something that's looked at by the head of customer services.
Thank you. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, if I could look at a different area in the annex, page 35, OCC 06B, number of days process housing benefit new claims and change events. Whilst traditionally we've been much better than the national, there does seem to have been quite a deterioration in recent quarters, well, last year and recent quarters. Just wondered what's happened.
So I can answer it statistically, the what behind it, I need to go and find out. But just to remind everybody, it's not a measure of our performance within CYC. It's a measure of the Department of Work and Pensions performance in processing claims, and we can keep an eye on it to work a whole system approach to make sure where pressure might be being put on by volumes coming through from us is dealt with by our partners. So I can ask the head of customer services who would deal with this to provide you a little note about why the DWP may be having extended times. Sorry, I don't
given how important it is for the individuals involved to get claims processed fast. You're sort of living to week and so on.
Yeah, probably, I suppose, worth us on having a better explanation of whether that measure relates to our performance or a dependency with DWP. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Can I also ask, in terms of the red-rated large projects, we've had a deterioration. What's the additional one that's now in red?
Which page is that?
Sorry, page 35, about 2/3 of the way down.
Yes.
It's Corp 02L.
Oh yeah.
And it's gone up from 2 last year, 2 in the first quarter to 3.
Yeah, so obviously the projects go to audit and governance, but I'm pretty sure the additional project is York Station Gateway, which has now been rated as red within that quarter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Widdowson.
It's a simple one. 26, which talks about the level of carbon dioxide emissions across the city. Is there a way of putting something in there, Ian, that actually says a lot of it is to do with the decarbonisation of the electricity supply and how much is to do with what we've done, so that it's really clear if it's our work or if we're benefiting? And it's great that we're benefiting because we all are. It's how much is ours. And I know you've got the experts sat behind you, but if we just put a line in there, being a bit more honest about it.
I'll discuss that with.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vassey.
Thank you, Chair. It's related to the same item. In paragraph 36, it's asserted that there are no direct implications for environment and climate action related to the data and activity contained within the report. Paragraph 26 shows that the CO2 equivalent emissions dropped by 196 tonnes last year. That's a fall of just 5.3%. If performance continues at this rate, it will be 2 decades before we deliver a zero carbon council. But we're committed to delivering one by 2030, just 6 years from now. Surely this should be a huge red flag rather than a no direct implications. What is being done to address this? And why does the report say there are no implications to the council?
Thank you. I think it's not really a question for us. There are no direct implications to the council of this report because this report is not decision making, so it can't have any implications. All we're doing is providing you with information. So there are no implications from this report. That's what it means. It's not saying there are no implications from the range of activity that's going on across the council. This report has no direct implications because it's not making any decisions.
I think it's a point that can be picked up in a report specifically focusing on the data here and the actions that surround it. So, yeah.
I understand the point that's being made.
Yeah.
But I find it deeply scary to hear that we're reducing emissions by just 5%, because we all know around this table how serious this is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I'll blame Councillor Merritt for bringing my attention to page 35. I'd forgotten about that particular bit. Staff headcount at CYC is on a steady upward tick, and quite a significant upward tick. That was quite surprising to me in terms of the financial situation we're in. And given that the bulk of our spend in adult social care is not CYC staff, is there an explanation? I would have expected there to be less FTE, or is that the fact that we're now having more part-time, fewer? We're now having more part-time staff, which is putting the numbers up. It seems to be counter that we're constantly reducing services, but we're employing significantly more staff year on year.
Okay, so there is a little bit of movement into the authority for our GP that will be in there for a couple of headcounts. We've obviously had some people move into the authority within the housing department, but the majority of this is people converting from working with York, as the numbers from working with York, and the placements have dropped by around about 300 or so, and some of those people have converted across and into the council as part of the establishment. So I think we've discussed, haven't we, about having a stable workforce where there's a more clarity, and that's part of the outcome we'd expect with a headcount increase.
Yeah. Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, it's one of our specific cost saving strategies is to reduce reliance on agency staff. And not only is that about cost saving, it's also about delivering better services and being a better employer, because permanent jobs are better than temporary jobs. And you get a better service if you staff it with people who are in secure employment. So this is about cost saving, but it's also about being a better employer.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Hearing there. Thank you. And some really good stuff in here in, again, the follow through on the FOIEIR stuff. So 96%, 98% to match the 97% last time compared to 81% a few years ago. So really good upward trend on that. But the same issue persists in terms of complaints responded to in time. I know it's better than it was previous quarter, but only 73% responded to in time isn't very good. And just to match that to this is all on page 36, by the way. And just to match that to the TAP 37 metrics around the panel reporting good, bad experiences, sort of got half saying that things are good or excellent, less than, and a decent number saying satisfactory, but quite a lot saying poor as well. So those complaints responded to in time definitely feeds into that general perception of service. We've had reports on that. We will have more reports on that. So there's not really, I don't think, any need to answer that. But if you've got any comments on that, would be good. I just wanted to call out that it wasn't a one quarter thing. We still have this set of challenges and positives ongoing.
I think we'll cover that audit and governance committee as part of the corporate governance regular update that Lorraine brings, and we'll get some data there on complaints, so we'll be able to maybe delve into that in a bit more detail there.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands, so thank you for coming back so soon after our last update, and we'll no doubt see you again for quarter three. So that brings us on to item 7, York Climate Commission update. As I explained at the beginning of the meeting, the hope was that Councillor Kent would be able to join us for a discussion about the update report, which Sean has kindly drafted. So I don't really want to put Sean on the spot of that discussion without the executive member present. So what I would like to do is to invite members to make any points they would like to make about what they would like to see included in a potentially a more comprehensive report to come back at some point in the new year, just so we can hopefully that meeting have a more meaningful discussion on the work of the Climate Commission and some of the activities of some of the working groups which our public speaker mentioned she's actively involved in, which was good to hear. So I'll throw it open to members, and I'll invite Sean once we've gathered some feedback to make any response you'd like in as the author of this report. Councillor Rose.
Yeah, well, it's a direct question, I guess, but pick it up with all the other questions and comments. Just to flag the point made in public participation about the lack of the food aspect in the working groups, and I sent a relatively detailed email to you earlier around the motions and petitions, but one of those was specifically around what we do as a council in that food and environment space. So it is something that we have in the past called out, something we need to improve. It'd be good to know where it fits into this. Beyond that, I was quite surprised at how lightweight this report was. And it is, the working groups being formed is good, but what are they actually doing and what's the progress in those is kind of where the detail is that I'd like to see. So calling out for the next item on the agenda, that would be really useful to see a bit of what the intent is, what the expectation is on timelines, that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Rose has said everything I was going to say. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my concern about the area of climate commission is how we duplicate within the city, how there's lots of bodies coming and looking at doing their little bit of it rather than coming together. And so related to that, what I think would be good to see in the report would be across the country where lots of cities are doing the same sort of thing, who is particularly on top of the linking it all together, no duplication. Just think of something trivial like websites. There's lots of climate-y entities that have their own websites, and they're all talking about things I've been like the York Environment Forum or parts of the Climate Commission. Shall we put that on our website? Is that covered onto our web? Except so all those sort of levels of duplication. And so I think particularly across the country, who is doing it well in terms of bringing things together without replicating what others are doing.
Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, also picking up on what the public speaker said, paragraph 4, there's a reference to place-based climate action network, which they seem to suggest was obsolete. I don't know if that's correct or not, but I just wanted to flag that to make sure we follow up and just make certain that it's not, or that there's an equivalent thing in place. And I'd similarly picked up on the previous agenda item, the point that Councillor Vassie made around the reductions in carbon dioxide or the lack thereof. Actually, by my maths, it's twice as bad as you made out, because it's a 2-year gap, not a 1-year gap. So even more depressing. But I think, this climate commission, as I understand it, is designed to be looking at, how do we bring everybody together across the city, recognizing that, the things that are within our gift and things that are out with our gift. What I think is probably most useful from our perspective as a scrutiny committee is, I think it would be really helpful actually just to have a quite direct steer on how we can be supportive of the council's engagement with the Climate Commission. What is it that we as a scrutiny committee can do that will help? Because as Councillor Vassie says, I'm sure everybody around this table is desperately looking at the numbers going, this is not going fast enough, what on earth can we do? Sitting here talking about it probably isn't that helpful. So it's, our role as scrutiny is to add value. So it's where do we add value to this work that's ongoing?
Thank you very much. Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think a lot of the same themes have been touched on, particularly relating to collaboration. Just to talk about the combined authority a little bit more, I know that they've got a key focus on climate, and rather than, as Councillor Stewart said, just them continue to do their own research and not having a joined up strategy, it'd be very good to engage combined authority, but also to look at what towns across North Yorkshire are doing and places across North Yorkshire are doing to work out how we can incorporate that in our strategy as well. We're a very diverse and different place, North Yorkshire, but I think there's going to be a lot of value that other areas around us can add. So might be something to think about there.
Thank you. Councillor Widdowson.
Again, a lot's been said, and I think Councillor Rose summed it up nicely at the start. My concern is it's extremely lightweight. And then when you go and look at the website, which it refers you to, the website is significantly out of date. So it's got Matthias Roos as the chair, and he resigned last March. And I know we're still looking for a chair. I think the whole of that if we're going to add value, I think the whole of that website needs the different feeds in it and the latest up-to-date stories. Most of the stories on there are 2 years old. And quite a few are now inaccurate because you've delivered much more work, so it could be singing more about it. And what would be really interesting, I know that you've invited us all on the 9th of January to the Climate Commission update, is actually what is going to be in that update and making sure if we're going to add value to it, that it's delivering rather than it's just creating more hot air.
Thank you. Councillor Bassey.
Thank you, Chair. Well, my positive I note the public speaker mentioned biodiversity and food when she was talking about the working groups. In my view, the Climate Change Commission needs to produce a document quantifying what it has achieved in carbon cutting of emissions every year, so that we have a measurable way of seeing what's going on. The working groups as well should identify carbon savings in the area they're working on and have this ratified by the entire Climate Commission. At the end of the day, I know I don't need to tell Sean this, but you cannot manage what you don't or cannot measure. And it's the lack of data. You know, how many tons are we aiming to save in this area, in this area? What have we identified could be saved in transport, in building and retrofit? How are we going to lead towards that? How will we get there? And then reporting back at the end of the year, what have we achieved? Fundamentally, unless that exists, as others have said, gathering round tables and agreeing that it's very serious is neither here nor there anymore. I would urge the Climate Change Commission to get its teeth into identifying quantifiable targets every year and then telling us what they're doing.
Thank you. Councillor Widdowson.
Just to follow up on that point, Sean, we know you've got all that data. We know you've got that in terms of the strategy. If you're going to look at biodiversity and food, we've got FERA that are global leaders a few miles away. So there's, you know, I'm building on what Councillor Stewart said, there is an awful lot of work going on. But what we do need to do at the point of repeating myself is do the doing. We've done a lot of the thinking, it's doing the doing, and I know that you're working really hard to get the funding and to get the experts, and there aren't enough warm bodies to do it, but it is doing the doing, not doing the talking about it. And I think that's where we can really support you. Not in actually going out and doing the retrofit, because I'm rubbish at changing a plug, but you know, we could all help you in that area.
Thank you. I think my observations was, I think it would be helpful to set out this in detail the terms of reference of the Climate Commission, because I don't want us to set them up to be doing things that they were never intended to do. You know, we've got a climate strategy, and I know there was a recent executive member decision session where there was a discussion around the regularity of reporting on the impact of things that are being done. So I think it would be in a sort of refreshed report coming in the new year, as well as setting out, I think in clearer terms, what the Climate Commission is for and what it's not. The other things that the council is doing in terms of measuring impact of interventions, although I appreciate a lot of that is in terms of the actions that we're taking as an authority. So I think it's something about putting the Climate Commission in context, just so we're not setting themselves up, say to the working group, why haven't you done X, Y, and Z? And them say, well, no one told us we were meant to be doing that. And yeah, on the point of duplication, I think if people are willing and keen and eager and want to participate, and being part of a working group is a way to do that, I think that's fine. I know I kind of was invited to join the transport working group, and I was trying to get clear in my head, well, how does this relate to other transport related groups? And then I just kind of sobbed quietly, trying to connect it all in my head, because I couldn't find the terms of reference, and that's probably my fault for not having looked hard enough for it. But so I think there's something around context and being very clear the purpose of the Climate Commission. That's not to say it can't evolve and do more and do different things if the enthusiasm and the expertise and the will is there. But I'm guessing when there's a new chair in place, that those are the questions they may be asking, and they may be wanting to shape it going forward. It shouldn't be a City of York Council instructed body. It should have, we facilitate, but it should have sort of more autonomy. So that's probably a discussion we can have in more detail in probably in March, but we can discuss it outside the meeting. Any other feedback for Sean? Councillor Rose.
Just one side point on that duplication in council external piece, I guess, is given the importance of climate change, it would be in some councils, they'd have had a subcommittee from this committee looking specifically at this, and this is better than that because it actually does bring all the experts into one place. But if it were a working group or task force or subcommittee or whatever, it wouldn't have had a chair gap for anywhere near that long. So anything we can do to support making sure it does exist and function and has someone in situ who actually makes sure that works, that for anybody is going to be a big gap. So more broadly, anything that we can do to plug into this outside of just coming back here every 6 to 12 months, I think would be quite useful as well.
Yeah, and if I don't know who's been invited to the event in January, but it may be, if there's space, it may be useful for members of this committee to go along if we're invited, to find out a bit more, to interact, to engage, and to understand what the future holds. Thank you for your comments, and I'm sure the Vice Chair and I can liaise with Councillor Kent and with Sean outside the meeting to talk about what we can bring back in the new year. That's okay. Anything you want to say in response, Sean? Yeah, I know you've been frantically typing away to capture all of that. Councillor Vassey.
Okay, yes, just a quick comment to finish from me. We're members of the Covenant of Mayors. The Covenant of Mayors represents over 12,000 cities and local authorities across the world. All of them have to produce sustainable energy action plans. You can go on their website and see hundreds, thousands of these things, examples of best practice. What we seem congenitally unable to do here is to look to that as a reference point to get examples of how practical things are done and what carbon savings come from those. So maybe we could help the Climate Commission to steer them towards that vast reservoir of best practice at the Covenant of Mayors.
Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
The only observation I would make to that is that I think that there is probably quite a lot of best practice out there that we all, and I'm saying this in the royal we, have a tendency to look at and go, oh, I don't really like that. I don't really want to do that. Or that's not the thing that I think is the thing that I want to do. And it's actually how we get beyond that and go, well, actually, no, these are the things that have to happen. So, you know, when we're looking at things like transport strategies or movement and place strategies and those sort of things, you know, unless we start to remove private vehicles, unless we start to retrofit more houses, unless we start to do some of those things that aren't necessarily easy and straightforward, but have to happen. And actually, there's an onus on all of us to not just look and cherry pick at the things that are convenient or helpful, and say, well, actually, if you know, I'm here. You know, if there's a resource there that says this is best practice, these are things that as a city we need to do to decarbonise. You know, nothing worth fighting for was ever easy, and all that sort of stuff. You know, I think we can see from the numbers. I mean, you know, the data shows that any carbon reduction that we might have thought looked like we might be going in the right direction actually was probably just due to COVID, and we bounced back again. You know, this is bigger than just us as a council, isn't it? This is us as a society have to make a decision as to which way we go. But actually, if we want to sit around here as a committee, I would far rather be doing something useful than talking about all the things that we ought to be doing and then squabbling over them when we actually try to make a decision on them.
Okay. Thank you for that contribution. And the good news is, as we move on to work plan, we have the next 3 meetings will be giving more airtime to our climate change responsibilities. January, we're talking about offsetting and insetting strategy. Are we still on for that, Sean? Also in January, major projects update on Castle Gateway, and Debbie will be back with us to talk about social value policy in relation to procurement. We may have an update on the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny review that many of us have been involved in, but we'll see where we are with that piece of work and whether it's ready to come back. And then sort of tentatively the sort of Climate Commission Part 2 may come to our 10th of March meeting, but we can discuss that with Councillor Kent and Sean outside the meeting. So that's what's coming up on the work plan. Any comments on any of that? No? And there's no urgent business, so thank you, everybody. And I suppose this is our last meeting of the year. Have a happy Christmas. Good night.